Good day, Underdog Leadership Podcast listeners. It's Jenny Mitchell here. It's been a hot minute. Welcome to season 4. And I was thinking about this as I was preparing for this podcast on the subject of how to give yourself permission to do the big thing. And I'm going to talk more today on the podcast about my process of compiling and writing a book, which is launching this year. Yay! Very excited to tell you more about that. But I was thinking about this podcast and how it would have been so easy for me to have stopped after season 1 or after season 2, right? How often do we start something with the end in mind? And so one of my reflections or observations for you as listeners today is the power of sticking to something matters. The power of learning and growing through something matters. And so that idea of crawl, walk, run, crawl, what my podcast looked like in season 1 is very different, I hope, than what it looks like in season 4. I've certainly learned from all my processes and my mistakes. I'm going to talk more about that later. And I've learned how to get better at something. And wouldn't it have been a shame if I hadn't started? And that really is the main message of today is whatever it is you're thinking about or processing or wondering about yourself, work-wise or personally wise, wouldn't it be a shame if you never started? And so that might just be enough to give you the kick in the pants you need to start something that feels really uncomfortable or something you don't know anything about, or something that makes you feel stupid. And we've talked on the podcast many times about how women tend to avoid things that they feel stupid doing, and therefore they don't get the experience of it. So beginning of season 4, I just wanted to say also, I am joining you on season 4 with a brand new microphone, a Shure microphone, which is an up level from the microphone I started using at the beginning of the the beginning of the season 1. And so my invitation also to all my listeners was, is there something, I love this question, is there something in your life that you can up level right now? Something you can up level. Let me give you some examples. I up leveled this microphone. Your coffee mug that you use every day. Has there been a coffee mug you've been eyeing and you finally decide you want to up level to that? Buying yourself a nice watch. I remember the day, this is probably too much information, sorry folks, where I got rid of all the underwear in my drawer that was perfectly functional, but really, really ugly, and I hated wearing it. It was like clearing these things out to make room for a new and improved me, or a better me, or a me that I was becoming, rather than the me I had been in the past. So an invitation to splurge on yourself. And I'm not, you know me, I'm not a person that spends money willy-nilly, but what I mean is something that would make you happy, may bring you joy. Maybe it's a new notebook, like a fancy notebook. I know for Christmas, I asked for a Coach wallet, which felt like a huge investment. And yet my family was very happy to be providing it to me. I've given them a really easy Christmas gift. And every time, you guys, I'm not joking, I open up my purse and I look at that wallet and I bring out money, it makes me smile. So that idea of up-leveling something is something I'm going to really keep as a theme on the Underdog Leadership Podcast for this season. The second thing I want to say, and this is really core to who I am as a coach, as an executive coach, as a leader, as a facilitator, is I want to walk alongside you. I don't want to be one of those people that hops on a podcast and tells you how to do things. I too am doing the work. I want to do the work alongside you. I want to learn with you. I want you to tell me what you've learned. Something we learned in our coaching program that's really important and fundamental to the work is the coachee always comes to the session whole. What that means is, as a coach, I'm not here to tell you how to do something. I'm not here to demonstrate step by step. I'm here to ask good questions, to provide a mirror, some context, some exploration for you to make your own discoveries. But I wanted to make sure I highlighted today, we're not about fixing, right? I'm not about making, fixing you or fixing you, the listener. I'm here to provide some context. I'm here to observe and hopefully bring you some new insights. That's something I really do care about. And take from this podcast what you will and implement it. And if you implement it, I'd also love for you to just tell me about it, because it's very lonely up here. Anybody who does podcasts will know that it's extremely lonely. You talk, I'm in a room by myself with the microphones glaring in my face, and I have my notes for this podcast, but I'm sort of imagining who I'm speaking to, but I'd love to hear from you guys. And maybe with that, what I will also make the commitment to do on these podcasts, I love how I'm holding myself accountable to my entire listenership. You got to love that, is to share more about the work I'm doing through Chavender, the work I'm doing as an executive coach, to provide you opportunities to engage with me, because I really do want to be a resource for the people who are listening in and tuning in, and also giving you all the inside scoop on the fun stuff. Okay, so we've set up the scene for season 4, except I haven't given you the title of the season. And that's a super easy thing, because this season is called Embracing Ambition. It is not the crawl, not the walk, but the run for me. And the book that I have co-authored with 12 amazing women CEOs is finally coming to print in March of 2024. More details to come out about that, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But that has really been something that I have given myself permission to do. And that's what today's podcast is all about. And that idea of giving yourself permission, the irony was I had all sorts of thoughts in my head about what I wasn't ready for, what I couldn't do. You know, I wasn't an academic enough to write a book. I love books, and I've always enjoyed learning, and books are one of my core ways I learn. The other way, of course, is podcasts and communication and connections with other people, things like masterminds, things like coaching groups, which I also absolutely adore, because I am a people first focused person. Is that a thing? A people first focused person. I think I just made something up. So let's talk about this permission piece. And my big thing that I wanted to do was write a book. And I thought I would provide a bit of a framework for you. And as you're listening along, maybe there's something that's been niggling you for a long time. Maybe it's going for that promotion. Maybe it's trying a new course. Maybe it's getting back into the dating scene if you're somebody who's been out of the scene for a while. Something that feels uncomfortable. And you'll know from the Embracing Ambition book, which is launching in March, excuse me, one of the pillars is that ambitious women tend to take on roles and jobs that they know almost nothing about in the pursuit of learning. And somehow, it's sort of like being thrown in the deep end. Somehow they figure it out, they grow, and they learn from it. So every time you step away, think about this. Every time you step away from doing something or trying something, you're also stepping away from an opportunity to learn something and to grow. That really is what I think courage and getting outside your comfort zone. If we were meant to be comfortable, I would just wear my comfy slippers all the time and have a nice warm house coat around me, and I'd stay in my bed and I'd do digital marketing, because that's safe, right? But this podcast is all about getting out from out underneath that number 2 role and getting in front and becoming a number 1, and whatever that means to you. So step number 1 in this giving yourself permission to do something big, I think, starts with permission slips. You got to decide and give yourself permission to go for it. And sometimes the permission is not external like you think it is. I'm not this enough, whatever. It's actually internal. You have to take a look at some of those core beliefs that you grew up with that no longer serve you. And so that kind of fits nicely into my next step, which is get quiet. And trust me, folks, for an extrovert, a raging extrovert like Jenny Mitchell, getting quiet is really challenging. I actually just completed the Enneagram training. I'm going to talk more about that in further podcasts. But the Enneagram training taught me that I'm a 7, an enthusiastic visionary. And my core motivation, get this, love sharing this with everybody on my podcast list, is to experience everything and avoid pain. So one of the ways I do that in my life is I keep myself so busy that I can't slow down enough to get quiet and figure out what I really want, because I'm so busy chasing all the shiny objects. Please tell me that you can relate here somewhere. Thank you very much. So when I get quiet, the real things I want and desire come out. Whether that is this is a great example. I spent some time thinking about the podcast. How do I want to serve you guys that are listening? How do I want to show up for you? What kind of an atmosphere do I want to create? I want to create a quality podcast. Well, that means I have to have a new microphone, hence the beginning of this podcast, right? So that question of what do you want? It's only 4 words, but man, is it ever loaded. Because I don't know about you, but I've been conditioned to wait to see what everybody else wants and then go along with the flow. Not a great business strategy for a solo entrepreneur, got to say. And so this idea of, I'm going to talk more about leadership vacuums. I have had to work really hard to get quiet with myself, to ask myself, what do I want? Do I want more money in the business? Do I want more time in the business? Do I want more amazing experiences? Do I want to travel? Do I want to stay home? All of the questions I asked myself, I'd love for you to ask yourself. So when you get quiet, you ask, what do you want? And this one is the next one. Why do you want it? What will this thing bring to your life? And then what will be different if you had it? So if you were to able to do this thing, let's use my example. I want to have a better podcast, right? I want to have a more elevated podcast. Why do I want it? Because I've been doing this for a while and I feel like I'm ready to up level again. I hope that it will enhance my listenership. I hope that it will help drive leads into my coaching business. I hope that by getting to know me on this podcast, you feel more comfortable, my dear listeners, to reach out to me around executive coaching, around masterminds, around leadership and team development. And so that was what would be different, which is a core motivator for me for sure. And then here's the kicker question on the get quiet. Do you already have it? Or if you don't already have it, what parts of it do you already have? And so what I love about that question is it's not only about acknowledging what's not available, what do you want, but also how lucky you are for what you already have. I already have a podcast. I already have a great team in place that helps me execute the podcast. I already have great ideas. I always have ideas, trust me, on what I can put on the podcast. What I am up leveling with is systems, and sort of adding on that layer of more guests, more reach, more visibility, all the marketing pieces of the podcast. So there are many parts of this that I already have a successful podcast. And that I think is really worth saying as well. Let's just flip for a minute. I've been talking about the podcast. How about a relationship in your life? Whether it's personal, whether it's with your kids, whether it's with a boss or a colleague, you might want a more fulsome relationship for many, many reasons. One of which might be to find your next role inside an organization. Why do you want that job? What will be different when you have that title of CEO or that title of VP or whatever that title is for you? And then the question of, do you have it already? That might stop you in your tracks for a second. So you may not have the title, but you may have many of the responsibilities already, which might make it even more comfortable for you to start thinking and imagining yourself in that future role. So give yourself permission, get quiet. I wrote, listen to your heart. That sounds so cheesy, but it is so true, right? Know what you want and don't apologize for what it is that you want. And it can be as crazy and harebrained as you want. It can be as simple and as sensible as you want. The other day I said, I want a dedicated charger for my car because I'm so tired of being stuck out in the middle of nowhere and having no way to charge my phone when I'm driving around. These are simple things, but they're solvable once you identify them. For many of us, our dreams and desires or our next steps have been quiet or hidden for a very long time. So the other thing I invite you to do is be a little gentle with yourself as you're kind of exploring this, because I think some of the habits of negative talk are, oh God, Jenny, you can't even figure out what you need to do, or, oh my God, like the saboteurs jump in. If you've heard me talk about positive intelligence and tell you all the reasons why you don't deserve that, or all the reasons why, oh my God, you don't even know what you want. How dare you ask for X, Y, and Z? Be gentle, be compassionate with yourself, and just, I kind of think of them as like a little spark in a fire. You kind of have to blow oxygen on them. You have to give them space. And I know for me, that means stepping away from some of those traditional run around with my head cut off, those things that I do to keep myself from thinking about myself. How's that? So we get quiet. And then the next one, it's interesting as I read this, made some notes before the call. It says, let go of expectations. I don't know about you, but when I think about launching a book, there are so many ways that's supposed to look to me. That's so many ways other people have launched a book, so many ways I could go down the comparison path. And that is not a way to live your life. So letting go of those expectations is really important. That was kind of, rung true to me the other day when I've been exercising online for a long time through Zoom. So I haven't set foot in a gym in a long time, dear listeners. And recently over the holidays, I got back into a gym space or an exercise space. And I noticed myself right away with the mirrors all the way across, my eyes glancing to other people, or that automatic trigger to look at your body and say, oh, I hate that part about my body. Oh my God, here we go again. I shouldn't have worn that shirt. Like all that negative self-talk, all that comes from these expectations that we have of how we're supposed to look, right? And really, the most important part of that whole thing is the fact that I showed up at this new space. I tried something different. I hate going into a new space and not knowing where to put my coat and not knowing where to put my shoes and all that stuff, right? But I did it anyway. And I think the element of celebration there and letting go of the expectations of what it's supposed to feel like. Sidebar for those of you that struggle with anxiety or get really nervous in new spaces. I just want to say, first of all, that I feel you. I have anxiety and I've had it for a while, and I've been learning over the years how to cope with it. It is no longer the barrier that it used to be for me. And one of the things that's really helped me is to remind myself in that moment when I could bolt out of the gym, or that moment when I think, oh God, here we go again, is to just breathe. Just stay put, because my brain is desperately wanting to go somewhere else than the uncomfortable, that I might look stupid, that I might not have X, Y, and Z that I need to go in the class. And it's amazing when all you decide is that you're going to breathe and stay put and feel your feet on the ground, things get easier. Okay. So we've given ourselves permission. We've gotten quiet. We've let go of those expectations of how it's supposed to be and all the comparison stuff. You know, that quote, comparison is the thief of joy. And we've decided we want this thing. This is about how to give yourself permission to do that big thing. In my case, write a book. And then you make a simple plan. And I mean simple, like super simple. But there's one important piece. You must separate out the strategy piece, the planning piece, from the execution piece. Another way to think about this might be the strategy is like the thinking about the project, and the execution is the worker bee doing the steps of the project. And for a feeling person, an emotion, people-based person like me, this is very liberating, because being able to go into analytical mode allows me to kind of ground myself and figure out the steps. And at that point, I can go and seek feedback. At that point, I can kind of decide the order of operations, and I can scale up bigger or I can scale down. But that strategy piece is really important for any project. I've just been reading the book, How to Build a Second Brain, which is all about systems and organization. And that has been really interesting for me to build in pre-built systems to kind of execute on projects, which always have a natural arc to them. It doesn't matter what the subject matter is, right? It could be hiring a new person, HR. It could be a case for support development in my old world as a fundraising professional. It could be bringing a team around from a culture perspective. It all has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if you can think about the strategy quietly first and then build the steps. Now, here's a bonus content. Here is something that is so golden, so worth it. Write it down. Is the strategy's great. Think about it. And then when you go to execute, don't doubt the strategy. In other words, when you go to execute, that's not the time to double doubt yourself or think back or change your mind, or literally go through the steps And don't worry. I'm going to repeat this. Don't worry if they start to feel like the wrong steps or the right steps or all that stuff. I find that I get really hairy there, and then I have to go back to the strategy. And then can you see how I've caught myself in this crazy loop? Another way to say the same thing is to act and then feel, for those of us that are incredibly compassionate. Let me explain. We act first, which gets us started, and then we feel as we reflect and observe, and then we learn from it. The other way around, we start feeling first. We start to make this into this massive thing, over-engineer the whole thing, you guys listening. And then we try to act on it, and it's so convoluted, we can't move forward. So I guess my takeaway here for you is to kind of trick yourself into moving forward in some way, and then allowing yourself to feel it afterwards. And here we go. Final step, ignoring the negative voices and the saboteurs. So at every turn, you're going to have to accept that this will not be perfect. Season 1 was not perfect. Actually, season 4 is not perfect either, but it's closer to perfect than season 1. And maybe a better word than perfect is excellent, right? I'm striving for excellence with the knowledge that I'm never going to get right there. But it is an aspiration that I hold for this season of the podcast. And you want to make sure that those voices, those saboteurs, don't stop you from you showing up as you. And that's where the permission piece comes from, giving yourself permission to go for it, to do the big thing, to do the scary thing, whatever that might be for you as you listen to this podcast. So I'm going to go back through them again. First, you give yourself permission. Then you get quiet and you listen to your heart. Then you let go of the expectations, how it's supposed to look for you. You make a simple plan that has strategy in it as well as execution step by step. And you do not let the two mix. And then finally you ignore and you just sort of give them a bless and release. Ignore the negative voices in your head. And you say, thank you so much, Mr. Saboteur. But today I'm going to move forward no matter what, even if it feels uncomfortable. And the final step, of course, is you evaluate, you take a look, you assess, you ask yourself what went well and what didn't go well. And you take that project and you use it to duplicate, replicate, and build back better. So rather than going back for the next project and going from scratch, you build on what you already have in place. That could look like templates. That could look like advisors that you can reach out to again. There's so much about duplication and replication in our work. And I don't know about you, but I am striving every day to spend my very, very valuable time on the most important parts of my business and myself. And so anytime I can streamline something, dear listeners, I do it. I build a template. If I'm going to come back to it, I make sure I have it like itemized down. That goes for everything in my life because I want to make sure that I am constantly churning or shifting, or maybe it's more like a spiraling upwards to a better version of my life. And I'm not joking about this. Like, this isn't just something I say. This is something I think about every day. I think about, well, how could I do that better next time? And not in the pursuit of, oh, you sucked, don't ever do that again. Or, oh, you sucked, fix it. Do you hear how the thread back to the beginning of this podcast about coaching, about bringing your better self to work every day as you grow and evolve, right? And you embrace that evolution, that learning for yourself. We made it to the end of the podcast. How to give yourself permission to do the big thing, like write a book. So my book is coming out with my co-authors. The virtual book launch is going to be fan-freaking-tastic. It's going to be on March 8th. Of course it is, because it's International Women's Day. Please mark your calendars. It's 12 noon Eastern Standard. I'll put a link to the show notes for the virtual book tour. It's going to be on LinkedIn, so you can look for me there and join me there. You'll remember that there are 5 pillars of the research to the book. The book's called Embracing Ambition. The 5 pillars are perception barriers, embodied roles, embracing challenge. I've just talked about that today. Glass cliff assignments. That's a situation where you get hired into something that's near impossible. And finally, being visionary. And the book is this wonderful compilation of those themes married with the first person stories of my guest authors who are so incredibly honest and so incredibly raw. I'm humbled to be among them, to be honest. And it's a fantastic read for anyone in your life who aspires to be better. I'm just going to leave it right there because don't we all? At least you only get one chance here on this planet, folks, and it's a crapshoot. I'm certainly aware of that at age 50 of how long you're going to get. And so if you're not embracing every moment along the way, what's it all for? I look forward to hearing more from you this season. I look forward to connecting with you, bringing a couple more solo podcasts in and some special guests as well. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end here to season 4, episode 1. I have one more ask of you. Would you take the minute to go down and leave a review of the podcast? That makes a huge difference for us. Either click subscribe or leave a review. That's how we move up in the charts. And surprisingly or not surprisingly, I and my team have given myself some big goals for this podcast. I have a vision of reaching more people like yourselves, of hitting some other continents, a vision of people in Australia listening to this podcast and saying, I enjoyed that. And getting the message out about all of the important things we talk about helping number 2s become number 1s in work and life. And with that, I wish you a great day, a better day than yesterday, and give yourself permission. You're worth it.